Wherever you are today with social media, that you're ready to take the next step, and obviously the timing of where we are in many ways, whether you're ready or not, here we go. So I want to talk in this session about really tangible, practical ways how you can grow your church with social media. I often hear from pastors when it comes to social media, I don't know what to say on social media. Nobody cares what I ate for breakfast. And the reality is people probably care more than you think what you ate for breakfast, but it doesn't mean you need to post what you ate for breakfast. We have the good news of Jesus Christ. We have the best message ever to communicate, and now we have a platform that is engaged with 2.3 billion people. What an incredible opportunity for the gospel that we have it, and people today are spending hours a day on social media and with these technology devices that the ministry opportunity today is so great. And I want to help you in this first section of this message of what to say on social media and how to develop your content strategies. So there's 4 key parts to your content strategy. And the first thing that you need to have a great content strategy on social media is consistency. You need to be consistent on social media. You need to post and develop a strategy of how often are you posting on a regular basis. Are you posting once a day? Or are you posting once a week? What is your strategy so that you're going to post on a consistent basis? What's likely to happen is you're going to come to a conference like this and you're going to learn about social media, and you're going to post 10 times tomorrow. And then you're going to post 5 times on Monday, and you can post once on Wednesday, and then you're going to wait 3 months to ever post again. We can get excited about this. We need to run a marathon on social media, a marathon that's always winding because we have always got to adjust. But develop a strategy where you are posting consistently. Build a calendar, just like you might for your sermon series, that you've got the sermon series calendar for the next year, maybe for the next week. You build a calendar, even the next month. But build a consistent social media content calendar as to where you're going to be posting and how often you'll be posting there. The second is creative. We need to be creative on these means. Facebook is different from Instagram, which is different from Twitter. And when we communicate with words, we need to be creative. When we communicate with images, we need to be creative. When we create with videos, we need to be creative. And a lot of people, and myself included, will say, I'm not creative. And what we mean is I'm not artistic. But the reality is that we're all creators, and God is the ultimate creator. And whether you are artistic or not, it's likely that someone in your congregation is. And you need content that is going to engage people in a creative way. And so as you start building out your content strategy, it needs to be consistent and it needs to be creative and consistently pushing those limits of creativity. The third thing is it needs to be diverse. We need to mix up what you're saying. What so often happens is we'll build an assembly line for social media and we'll begin saying the same thing in different ways over and over again, but it looks the same. And so when someone sees it in their news feed, they think, I already saw that graphic because it looked the same as the graphic yesterday. So I'm just going to scroll right past that. But when we mix it up, where some posts have text on it, some have an image, some are a video, mix it up. Make sure they look different to catch people's attention in different ways. Now, there can be similarities, and you want to have some brand consistency, but your content needs to be diverse. Don't get in a rhythm of doing the exact same thing over and over again. And the fourth and probably most important aspect of your content strategy is everything you post needs to be valuable. Everything you post on social media needs to be valuable. You should not post just because I told you need to be consistent. I've got to post something because I'm supposed to post every single day. If it's not going to add value to the person that's going to see it, the person that's going to watch it, the person that's going to read it, don't post it. If all you can do is create one good post on social media a week, that's the best you should do, and that's your consistency rhythm. Everything you post on social media, every piece of content should add value to that person that's consuming it, the person that's seeing it, the person who's hearing it, add value. When it comes to finding what to post specifically, so those are the filters at which to build your content strategy. There are 5 different types of posts that I believe your church needs to build out within that content calendar. And I hope these will inspire some ideas for your church when you begin building out your content calendar. And I believe that your content should really begin with the sermon. that you've got great content that's already being created on a weekly basis from the pulpit, from the sermon. I work with a lot of businesses and they're like, just run our social media. Well, I've got nothing to create it off of. When it comes to a church, is if you've got that sermon that a pastor is putting hours and hours and hours of time into creating every week, social media is such a great platform to then repurpose pieces of that content in different ways, whether it's a quote or pulling a scripture passage or using a visual or a video clip. There's so many pieces of content that come out of that. So I think it starts by using the content or the sermon. And the first type of content that I think is most important is inspirational content. Inspirational content. This means there's no call to action. This isn't an announcement. This is literally just something that is going to inspire people. A minimum of 50% of your content should be inspirational in nature. In other words, you're going to minister to people before they ever come to your church, before they take any action. And so this is where a sermon clip is a great way of, it's kind of a micro sermon to introduce them to your church, to speak into their lives and in their regular daily lives, or to your congregation to remind them of what they heard on Sunday. And it's right there in the middle of their news feed. Just inspire them, minister to them right there in their Facebook newsfeed and through their Instagram stories. Find those opportunities to inspire them with the content you're creating. The second is information. Now, no more than 25% of your content should be informational in nature. When I look at most church social media accounts, it's 95% informational, if not 100%. We love announcements at church. The problem is our congregants don't necessarily love announcements. And imagine if you came to church on a Sunday and 95% of what you heard was announcements. And then there was a 5-minute sermon at the end of the announcement time, and then maybe a little blip of a song. We come to worship. We come to be ministered to. And there are announcements that we need to hear. And social media is very similar to a worship service that we need to be ministered to in this time. But we also need to hear some specific announcements, some things like come to. We're starting a new sermon series, or we've got youth camp coming up, and there's information people need to know about. But make sure it's no more than 25% of your social media content. The third is conversation. Conversation. This is social media. It's a place to build community. It's a place to be social. And the best place to start a conversation, the best way is the same as in a face-to-face relationship in a physical, is to ask a question. And so on social media, if you want to start a conversation, if you want to begin building relationships, you want to get to know your congregation, ask a question. And one of the mistakes people make in this conversation aspect of social media is they want to get deep fast. And so they'll say, what was the most meaningful spiritual moment in your life? Well, that's a hard question to answer. And my old pastor used to get frustrated. He said, well, how come when you ask, where's the best tacos in Texas, everybody has an answer for that. But when I ask, what was the sermon point that ministered to you this Sunday, nobody wants to tell me about it. Were they not paying attention to my sermon? And I was telling them, it's not that they weren't paying attention to your sermon. It's that it's hard to answer. It's not an easy one-word answer. Everybody knows where their favorite taco is, or their favorite pizza, or favorite color. Add simple conversation starters. Begin to warm up your community on social media. Ask easy to answer questions, and then move into deeper community and interaction and engage it and connect it to the sermon. But the easier the question, even things like, what's your favorite Bible verse? That's an easy to answer question. It's a very definitive response. Or what's your favorite worship song right now? As you begin to engage in different ways, you can bring it into what's going on in the life of your church and engaging. Or if you're preparing for a sermon and you're wondering how your congregation feels about something, ask that question. The number one response we got at Community Bible Church, every week we began asking this question: how can we pray for you today? And we got more engagement and response from that than anything else. And what was beautiful is not just how people posted their prayer requests, because immediately we as a staff began responding to their prayer request. But what ended up happening is they as a congregation began praying for each other right there in the comments. And every week you would see a prayer gathering join off of that one post. Very simple, same every week. How can we pray for you this week? It's powerful. The fourth thing is celebration. We need to celebrate on social media. We need to celebrate, and people do this on their personal. We celebrate birthdays. We celebrate, things that happen in our lives. We celebrate graduations. And the church, we have things that are important to our congregation, like baptisms, like youth camp, and things that happen in the lives of our church, or a new staff hire that we want to celebrate on social media. And we want to let our community know what's happening. And these are things that people want to engage with. People like to share those celebrations on social media. And so you as a church community have that opportunity to lead the celebration and begin the engagement around that. And then the last piece is connection. It's connection. And this is really looking behind the curtain. This is feeling personally connected to places you maybe couldn't be connected otherwise. This is sharing things like what you ate for breakfast. And so figuring out how you can engage and connect personally through social media with the content that you're creating, and giving people a look under the hood, giving people that opportunity to connect with you as a pastor. And I would say sometimes, now this isn't maybe on the church accounts, but sometimes even sharing what you ate for breakfast, that you'll be surprised how much people will then feel you as a pastor can become relatable to that congregant by talking about what football team you're cheering for on a Saturday, or who you're pulling for in March Madness. And obviously you can't do that this year, but finding those opportunities for connection and personal connection goes a long way. Now, the other thing that as we start a conversation, we can often quickly feel overwhelmed by how what to do. So what happens when people start responding to these posts, and who's going to respond to all of the comments and messages? And it is important that we're present on social media, and that before we start a conversation, we have a plan as to how we're going to continue the conversation. And I think this comes when we begin to engage and empower volunteers. Find those people that can jump on and have time and are able to respond to all of your social media messages. I think about it at most churches, you will have a receptionist or somebody who answers the phone, or you'll have a voicemail where somebody responds to those voice messages. You often probably have a form or an email on your website where somebody can go and message your church or you as a pastor, and you hopefully are responding to those messages. In social media, we need those systems as to when people comment on our posts, when they send our pages a message, that we're responding. And that doesn't mean that you, the pastor, or whoever is in charge is the person responding. It means that often that we're empowering our congregation to effectively respond. One of the things that we will often do and have done at the churches that I've been a part of is we create a response sheet. Now, this is very similar to what a call center might do. Is what you begin to find is a lot of people respond with the same thing over and over again. Church people like to say amen. And so you'll see that in a lot of inspirational posts on social media. Well, it means a lot to them, and they feel hurt if you will like that post. It doesn't mean you need to respond and say, thank you for the amen. Liking it is a way on social media to say, we heard you, thank you, but without saying it. And so there's just some natural ways to communicate. Well, we create a sheet of when somebody says amen, we like it. When somebody says something inappropriate or rude, we delete it. When somebody says something that we don't like, but we don't have a good response to, we leave it alone. But creating a general response of this is how we want to respond to posts. And these are the answers. We hear this every Sunday of what time is your church service? 10 o'clock. We know that, copy and paste. Where do I take my kids? There's a copy and paste, or here's a link to where you can go. But you will have some pretty systematic, what I found is that 95% of comments on social media are very copy and paste off of a one-page sheet that you can easily create for a volunteer. And when that volunteer doesn't know what to do, guess what they can do? They can call you. That's when they can alert you. You don't have to be the one to respond to every single comment and message. You've empowered that volunteer, and then they can engage you as you need to. And it's a way to maximize your time and empower them to be in ministry. This is digital ministry. I remember I shared earlier that the 72-year-old woman who was a volunteer with me, and probably the best volunteer I've ever had, her name was Ruthie. She came up to me. We had this like ministry fair at the end of church, and go out to the lobby, and everybody had a table, and I had the online ministry table, and the women's ministry was next to me. everybody wanted to be in the women's ministry. There's a long line for the women's ministry. Nobody wanted to go in the online ministry one at that time. Well, she was tired of waiting in the line, so she's like, well, I'll just talk to you until this line ends. And she started asking us questions about, what is this like? What do you do? Well, I don't have a Facebook account, so can I even do it? And she said, well, I have an iPad. Will that work? And we said, absolutely. We'll train you. She said, if you'll give me an hour of training once a week on how to use this iPad, I'll give you 20 hours in volunteer time. And sure enough, she gave us 20 hours in volunteer time when we just trained her, showed her the basics of what to do, and she became our strongest volunteer in that online ministry. And so it's incredibly powerful when you can empower, and she would often come to me in tears of, Nils, you've enabled me to be a digital missionary all over the world by using my iPad, by engaging through this technology that I never even knew was possible. It's a powerful thing when we empower volunteers. The last thing I want to say on this is my biggest recruiting tool later became that online ministry is the only ministry in the church that you can do in your pajamas. And so you can do it anytime, anywhere, and you can do it in your PJs. You can't do that in any other ministry in the church. So empowering volunteers, and it's an appealing opportunity that people can do early in the morning, late at night, or whenever it's convenient for them. And there's 3 key areas that I see that you can empower volunteers on social media beyond the response management. One is crowdsourcing creative. So one of the things that a church that I started working with does is they record their sermon every week. And just as I shared before, this might be your camera that you use and you record it on your phone, and they put it on Google Drive, and they created an empty Google Drive folder, and they say to their church, here's our sermon this week. If anybody wants to create a social media post, go for it and just upload them to the Google Drive and we'll post it, or you can take them off the Google Drive and post them on your own social media. And they crowdsource creative. What you begin to see the congregants do in the ownership, they then feel through that content that's developed and created by just giving them a video file and what they will do as a volunteer without you even having to give them the systems and processes along the way. And then response management, as I shared, of giving them access to those accounts and being able to respond to the comments and messages. And then the third is group leadership. So Facebook groups, as I shared, is one of the most growing aspects of Facebook today, and where community is really happening on Facebook. And you'll likely have a Facebook group for your parents, for your youth, for your singles, for your women, for your choir, and empowering those group leaders or individuals in your church to lead those Facebook groups and lead them on a consistent basis so that they're consistently on a daily basis posting something to engage or empowering others in that group to start conversations and develop the conversation around and within those groups. Now I want to shift to beyond social media as I see it and look at what I see as the new mass media. And so basically radio and television was a medium that churches couldn't access in the past. It would be too expensive with cameras, the TV time would cost too much, radio time would cost too much. But today with YouTube and podcasting, every church of any size has the opportunity to be on what I believe for the next 10 to 15 years is going to be the TV and radio of where people are consuming long-form audio and video. And they've existed now for more than a decade, but the rate of growth has been tremendous, and I believe the rate of growth that will continue is going to be even more significant. So let's talk about YouTube. Starting out, YouTube is actually the number 2 search engine in the world. It's owned by Google, and if you think about even a younger generation, I'm 39 years old. If I'm looking for information, I Google it. My wife is 38 years old. If she's looking for information, she YouTubes it. Everyone under 38 is YouTubing things. They don't want to just read an article about it. Show me how to do it. I remember even just coming here to Cape Cod. We live in New York City. We rented a car and we couldn't find the seatbelt. Now, we don't own cars, so there's a lot of things that we struggle with in regular life, I suppose. And I struggled with it for like 20 minutes of like figuring out the seatbelt. She YouTubed it in about a minute and a half, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you just pull the seat up and push this button." And YouTube was able to show her how to do it. And so YouTube is a powerful search engine, and I believe it's a powerful search engine for your church. It's likely that a lot of people will find your church by just Google searches. I believe a lot of people, if you're smart, can find your church by YouTube searches as you engage through that medium. It's also a video library and a social network. I believe people will often want to put it in the category of Facebook or Instagram and other platforms. It is so different. It's a video platform that's driven by search that is enabled social interaction, but it is not a social network as I see it. You can follow channels and you can comment on videos, but that's an afterthought. It's really a video consumption platform, and it really has the attention, especially of young adults. To date, 2 billion monthly active users log into YouTube every month. Those are people that log in with an account. I don't know how many of you that are even watching watch YouTube videos and never log in. I believe it's probably the majority of people watch it anonymously, and YouTube isn't even counting that in that 2 billion. It is taking up more internet usage than any other site on the internet. So it actually has more engagement than Facebook does as a whole. And a lot of that is because of the consumption of people watching YouTube videos. And then what happens is you watch one video, and then what does it do? It recommends another video, and you go down this path of following different videos that it's engaging with you. 81% of 15 to 25-year-olds in the U.S. regularly watch YouTube videos, and 73% of U.S. adults. Here's an interesting stat about YouTube. 70% of what people watch on YouTube is determined by YouTube's recommendation algorithm. YouTube is determining what you see on YouTube, most likely. And YouTube is likely to show people your content if you effectively use this platform and create content that YouTube deems valuable to others. And so you don't necessarily have to be the only person to drive people to your YouTube videos as it being a library. That search engine can be an incredibly powerful ministry tool for your ministry as you create videos. The second thing is that whether a video relates to a viewer's interest is 3 times more important than whether it has a famous actor. If you think about historically with TV and movies that people would want was Tom Cruise in the movie or not? Or who's the actor in the movie? Well, when it comes to YouTube, they don't care who's in the video. They care what the video is about. And I think as we create content that is unique to the individual with our YouTube videos, we have an opportunity to engage them around those topics in a very credible way without it being all about the personality that's in the video. So let me talk about a few best practices. So as you set up YouTube, it's video first. And at the core to whether you're going to succeed on YouTube is whether you have great content. But I think there's some key elements of YouTube that are going to help you maximize the platform to reach a stronger audience. A few things just to set up your platform well. Have a good banner image at the top, just like you would have on Facebook or Twitter. You need to set up all of your social platforms thoughtfully, and you don't want to change them consistently. And so on your Facebook page, you want to have a banner that's a first impression. On your YouTube channel, you want to have a banner that's a first impression. You also want to have a profile icon on all these channels that are all similar. So when people see that little icon that's representative of your church, that they correlate it. They know that this is your church on Facebook, and this is your church on Instagram, and this is your church on YouTube. And so you want to have consistency in how these channels are set up. And so your YouTube channel needs to be consistent with your other social platforms and have that branding consistency. The other thing to really optimize when it comes to creating your YouTube channel is create custom thumbnails. Now this is getting into the weeds of YouTube a little bit, but essentially the way the platform works is people will search a term, and then YouTube will give them recommendations, and then people will choose which video they want to watch based on YouTube's recommendations, and they will often choose based on the image, the thumbnail image that you add to that video. Now you can use a tool like Canva, C-A-N-V-A, that will help you create these, and it's a free tool, or you can get a discount. I think they have a nonprofit free version as well. But Canva is a great tool. You can create good thumbnails where you can help catch people's attention before they watch the video and choose whether they're going to take the 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even 45 or 50 minutes to watch your video. The third thing is to utilize playlists. Utilize playlists. You can organize. So it's a video library, and organize your content intentionally using the playlist that YouTube gives you. And then prioritize the SEO functions. So think about the title. Think about what somebody would search and title it thoughtfully for search. Use the description and the keywords to really engage people before they watch that video or even after, by having a link to your church's website or links to your social media accounts. And then utilize the end screen. This is getting into the weeds of YouTube, and one of the things I want to encourage you to do that I'm not able to get into here is, as you start creating YouTube videos, watch YouTube videos about creating YouTube videos. So search how to create an end screen in YouTube. And I think you're gonna find about 5 great videos, and based on their thumbnail, choose which video you wanna watch and get a tutorial on creating a good thumbnail. That's gonna go a long way to creating good videos. And what I wanna encourage you with is, it might feel overwhelming to you to create a YouTube video, but and don't wait till you have it all figured out. Don't wait till you know how to create great thumbnails and good end screens to launch a YouTube channel. I wanna challenge you, create a video and upload it to YouTube by the end of this week. By the end of this week, I wanna encourage you to put a video up on YouTube, and maybe that's the video you record for your services tomorrow. Maybe you capture it and you upload it to YouTube on Monday, and then next week, upload an even better video. Figure out how you can make it a little bit better, and then a little bit better, and a little bit better, but don't wait until you're perfect before you enter into the YouTube world. I believe we're in a land grab opportunity right now, where there's this digital real estate, and there's people that are kind of figuring out their new behaviors of consuming video content on this platform, and I want them to engage with your church. I want them to engage with your content. I was working with a church earlier this week, a new church about 5 years ago, and they invested significantly in some cameras about 5 years ago, and they prioritized YouTube as their platform. They didn't go into TV or radio. They said YouTube is gonna, that's where we're gonna really invest as a church on day one of our church. And then about 2 years ago, they had a sermon that really caught traction, a sermon series, and they now see millions of viewers every month on their YouTube channel. And they're not uploading all these fancy, flashy clips. They literally just upload their sermon every week. It's a 50-minute sermon uploaded to YouTube, and they're getting millions of views on a weekly basis of these sermon videos. It doesn't have to be flashy, but if you look at their content 5 years ago to what it is today, they got better week after week after week. And I believe it's not too late to start today with a smartphone and then get better and better and better and maximize this incredible search engine that can help people find our church and engage with our content. Few keys to success on YouTube is post great content consistently. It's just like all the other social media channels. Content wins, and posting consistently is essential to building a community on this platform. You promote your channel externally. Don't expect all traffic to come from YouTube. Just because you put it on YouTube doesn't mean they're going to drive people there. You need to drive people there from your email list, from texting them personally, like, hey, go watch the sermons up on YouTube, or I just posted a new video on YouTube, or post it on your other social media channels. Let people know that your content is there on YouTube. And then as it begins to organically build that traction, YouTube will start recommending it a lot based on how other people are engaging with it. Now, I want to shift to podcasting. I think podcasting is maybe the most native platform for churches, because this is actually a medium that as churches we have used for years. So many churches created tape ministries or made CDs of their content, and you can a whole lot easier than video content engage people with these audio files and with this audio content. Podcasting is interesting, is now about 20 years old as a medium. And Apple introduced iTunes podcasting about 15 years ago. And Steve Jobs called it TiVo for radio, or Wayne's World for radio, where this was this new way to consume content. And you consumed audio content on demand. And I believe this is basically where Spotify, in many ways, is replacing, and it's kind of Spotify and iTunes and Apple Music are replacing FM radio. Podcasting is doing for AM radio and that behavior. But the behaviors around this medium are very different. I've gotten to know recently James Boggs, who's the head of Apple Podcasts, and he told me when he reached out to me about a year ago that religious podcasts are the #1 podcast in all of podcasts. There are more religious podcasts in Apple Podcasts than any other medium. But the problem is they're not well produced and they're not well promoted. And so they're the least consumed of all of the podcasts in Apple Podcasts. And I think this is a challenge for churches today, that there's an opportunity that you can use your iPhone and audio record your sermon if it's in your small group or anything. You don't need a fancy microphone. I've been podcasting for about 5 years ago. I used the same microphone that I did 5 years ago. It's called a Blue Yeti microphone. It cost about $150. It plugs right into my USB on the computer, and it has great audio. One of my clients that we talked about earlier, Pete Scazzaro, I bought him the same microphone about 2.5 years ago, so he would start the Emotionally Healthy Leader podcast. I set it up in his home office, and he goes up there and records it into his personal computer and sends me a file, and that reaches over 100,000 ministry leaders every week. With that podcast that's recorded on a $100 microphone, it's possible. And I believe every ministry leader, whether you're recording your services or recording a different type of podcast, this is a medium that's engaging people globally and locally. And one of the reasons for that is it's a passive media engagement platform. People can consume audio on the go. So this is a great way to even do devotionals for your congregation or connect them while they're exercising, while they're driving, or while they're cleaning their house. It's a great medium, and the popularity continues to grow. There are currently over 100,000 podcasts out there on Apple Podcasts with 30 million episodes available. And 70% of the U.S. population is familiar with podcasts, and 50% would call themselves fans. This is a medium that is growing quickly, and I believe that number, and this is from 2019, I would guess that number has already increased significantly here in 2020, and I would guess even more significantly that as we're dealing with coronavirus, that people are going to be consuming a lot more YouTube videos and a lot more podcasts as they're home and not able to get out and about quite as much. And so I think this is a medium that is valuable for the future, but I believe this is a medium that's valuable for today. I hope that tomorrow you're capturing your message in one way or another with audio and with video to be able to maximize on these growing platforms. So let me give you some just technical, here's how podcasting works, and some 1, 2, 3s as to how you can get started. First, podcasting is different where with YouTube, you upload your video and you're giving your content to YouTube. The way podcasting works is you actually host your own podcast on a file server, and then you connect Apple Podcast or Spotify or iHeart, or there's lots of different Stitcher, lots of different podcast distribution platforms, then pull your file and give that to the end user to consume on their mobile device or whatever platform that they're consuming the podcast on. And then they're able to either stream it live or in real time, or they're able to listen to it on demand as they download it onto their device. A few of the favorite hosting platforms, just to give you some options here, is Libsyn, Libsyn, is my favorite hosting platform. It's 20 years old. It's the most stable, consistent, and it costs about $8 a month. This is not crazy expensive to get onto, and that is going to be your only expense when it comes to hosting your podcast or distributing your podcast, is your streaming provider or your file host. And it will give you all the tools you need step by step of how to connect it to Apple, how to connect it to Spotify. Several others, though. Spreaker is a new popular one that's a really great tool, or SoundCloud is very popular. All of them have different advantages or disadvantages. I choose the Libsyn because it's easy, it's simple, and it's stable. And so I have no hesitation recommending that, but I've also used these others, and they're very solid as well. And then there's lots of places to distribute your podcast. 70% of all podcasts are consumed on Apple Podcasts. So start there. It's a great place to go. I would say if you have a church website, make sure you have your podcast available there on your church website. Libsyn or these others have great ways to easily embed that audio file into your website to easily make that consumable. And then Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Spotify, Overcast, iHeartRadio are some other places that you want to distribute your podcast. These platforms will all walk you through those, and essentially They're just providing a library for people to find podcasts in. So you're connecting your file system through an RSS feed. And I don't want to get into the weeds of it. Basically record a file, upload it to a file host, and let them do the magic from there and begin reaching people. Here's a few keys to success. Number one, just like social media, just like YouTube, post great content consistently. And when I say great, it doesn't mean to be flashy, highly produced, just good content. If you're creating a sermon, I hope your sermons are good. So start there by creating great content. Number two is prioritize your art. This is one of the things James Boggs emphasized over and over again as I've grown and learned from him as the head of Apple Podcasts, is the art is how people choose whether they're going to listen to your podcast or not. This is just like the thumbnail on your YouTube videos. It should probably be the same as your social media profile icon to create consistency across all of the platforms. But I think that's why it's so important that you're using good art in that profile icon so it does catch people's attention. One thing I want to mention too when it comes to profile icons is you probably don't want to have words on your profile icon. A lot of people will leave their logo with the words on there, and it's almost impossible to read on most of the social networks or on the podcast platforms. Your name is almost always next to your profile icon. And so whenever your logo is displayed or your profile image is displayed, your name is right next to it. So you don't need those words that are going to be distorted on that image anyway. You need an image that's going to be very consistent and very recognizable as that profile image and as your podcast art. And then maximize search via titles, names, and descriptions. So it's very similar to YouTube. Be thoughtful in the way you title your podcast and the way you title those posts, and even give a description, because every word of that description is another word that the search engine within those podcast networks could find and pull up your podcast. And then promote your podcast through all the various podcast channels out there and that are available. So use your email list, use your SMS, and maximize all of those communication platforms to effectively bring people to your podcast and build the rhythm of growing that subscriber base.